Good afternoon and welcome to today's Industry Week webcast, Unlocking SMB Potential with Exporting. It is sponsored and presented by the Export-Import Bank of the United States. My name is Adrienne Salko, Senior Editor with Industry Week. I'd like to introduce today's presenters. We have with us Craig Carson, who is the CEO of Jayco Plastic Products, which is a rotational molder and twin sheet pressure former of both custom and standard products for the aerospace, printing, and automotive industries. He has been nominated for innovation awards in both the U.S. and Germany and has received the 216E Award for Excellence in Export Sales from the U.S. Commerce Department. We also have with us today Sharon Koenig, who is the Managing Director for the Eastern Region for the EXIM Bank. She has over 30 years of experience with the bank's products and advises exporters, bankers, and the trade-related business community in international risk mitigation and trade financing techniques. I'd like to turn the call over to Craig.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for signing into the webinar. I want to elaborate a little bit on my background so you can be your own judge as to how valid my comments are. I work in large companies, run divisions of large companies, but for the last almost 25, almost 30 years, I've either owned my own companies or owned and run them both. The one that we're discussing here today is one that I've owned and operated for about 20 years. So small and large, some financial background, operational background, marketing, that kind of thing, general background. And that was kind of important as I discovered and when I got into the export stuff. In fact, one thing that I'd sort of caution you on, if any of you have worked in large companies, it's quite different in a small company. The people that you can ask for assistance, the kind of depth on a management team, the kind of personal requirements are quite a bit worse in a small and medium enterprise. Some of you know this already, others may not. When I'm saying that, I'm talking about personal time commitment. There's really nothing that is going to possibly work unless you are individually committed to making it work. The second thing I would just say in a general sense, because it impacts on the personal time each of you are going to be committing, is you have to have a long time frame. I don't care which country you're talking about. I mean, we're very active in Western Europe, so you'd think it would be pretty similar to the United States, and it is in many ways, but it's also different. One of the biggest differences that I have noted over the many years I've been doing this is that the time frames are quite large, quite long. You have to be prepared also to enter into that particular industry niche. They're all smaller than they are in the United States. There's really no impersonal industry niche that I've ever been in. So you have to make those connections, and that requires time. But you do that, you are basically setting up an entry barrier to those other competitors, those other exporters who don't want to put that kind of time in. One of the most frequent comments I heard, no matter whether it's Western Europe or Japan or Mexico, as far as that goes, is American firms just don't really want to pay the time. They don't want to pay the cost of a lengthy introduction. And originally they were reluctant to discuss these matters with me, but I told them, I said, well, I'm in for as long as it takes. And that at least got me to the next step. So I'm just sort of warning you that there's a time commitment here which may seem much less than it is. Do not expect anything short term. You might luck out. I didn't. So plan on it that way, be my first thought. Let me show you a few things that I think might be more specifically appropriate. The kind of material, the kind of equipment I've got, the kind of company it is, again, these are things that allow you to kind of make a parallel between your own situation and mine. It's a manufacturing company, but it's not particularly big. I mean, we got about, 65,000 square feet in the plant. I mean, it's not exactly giant. I've got 3 machines that are rotational molding. I've got one pressure former. I've got one CNC machine. I've got other, secondary pieces of equipment, tooling and all that kind of stuff. But, we're not talking about some huge plant here. Now, everything I've got, though, I will tell you, is state-of-the-art. And I think the only thing in my experience that's going to really work in any kind of export situation is having products that the local guys can't produce. Otherwise, it's going to be, somebody that they know better and that they can go to without being a big deal about it. So I was very careful to make sure I had processes that were very uncommon throughout the world, but particularly so in the export markets that I wanted to address. And that although it may not be apparent, what I've got there on the slide, in fact, does comprise that kind of process technology. The other thing, too, is that in my case, I relied upon process technology to really provide a protection for intellectual property. You can't ignore this going in. There are all kinds of people in the world here. They're all really rather common, and if they can get something for nothing, they'll absolutely do it. You can bet on it. It's more endemic in certain markets than others, but there is a possibility in each case. I found that patent law is really pretty much useless. I spent a lot of money on it. It hasn't really done a thing for me. I would suggest that whatever you're doing to protect intellectual property is something that is either concealing the full process or the full design or whatever it may be that would prevent somebody else from doing it rapidly. I've made a particular point of doing that, and it's been successful so far. The kind of products that I typically export actually are, what you're seeing on the screen is stuff that is maybe looks like standard, and it is to an extent. And it's standard products in a very specific niche. In my case here, this is a printing niche, and all those little panels you see up there, those all are actually organic parts of a much larger and much more expensive machine. But it does actually give maybe just another little view here that you should keep in mind. I did this rather consciously. I make other products, make quite a bit of other stuff, aerospace and what have you, but I picked this one for export because I wanted to do two things. One, I wanted a niche. I wanted something where, in my case here, tolerance, durability, strength, originality, and those were very important, but also because there were large OEMs that I could supply to who would in turn sell it to customers. Now, this did a couple of things for me. It allowed me to use their organization to expand very rapidly my sales presence in a niche. It also allowed me to leverage that association into relationships that really take a lifetime to put together. I mean, it's been 20 years for me on this now, so I'm sort of now being able to operate independently, but initially that was not the case at all, and the endorsement of the companies with whom I was dealing was an important part of that. It also provided an element of intellectual property protection as well, too, because if somebody was planning on, copying something, they had to deal with a much larger local presence than I could ever hope to provide. So those were a couple of reasons why I selected that. That obviously doesn't work in all cases, but some variation on that is really something that you should give some thought to. Collections, everything from collections, even without the Ex-Im Bank insurance. I'm talking about just normal kind of business relationships. If you have to pursue anything in the courts, it's a big problem. So you need to have something like that association to make it smoother. There's some other things that are essential components. Even when you have a fairly standard product line, you've got to have a good technical local rep force. Got to have it. Real-time kind of answers. Commerce Department is outstanding for it. If you haven't done that before, if you had other experiences, I advise you to re-examine that conclusion, get back in touch with them. It was really a very critical association. They put me in touch with a lot of people, and that allowed me to accelerate the whole process quite a bit, a very important part of it. You have to revise your internal organization as well, too. It's pretty important that they are operating on the same time zone as your customers, and that they're familiar with a lot of the local customs in terms of how orders are placed and communications are made and so on. Language skills are critical as well. Okay, at that point, I think there's a question here for the audience. I'll take a pause.
Okay, the poll question is, what is your company's export volume? The potential answers are: 1, I'm not currently exporting; 2, less than 0.5 million; second, 0.5 to 1 million, and then 1 million to 3 million, 3 million to 5 million, 5 million to 7.5, or more than 7.5 million. We'll give it a second to get your answers, and then I'll read off the answers. Okay, the answers are in. I'm not currently exporting, 40%. Less than 0.5 million, 35%. 0.5 to 1 million, 5%. 1 million to 3 million, 3%. 3 million to 5 million, 5%. 5 million to 7.5 million, 3%. And more than 7.5 million would be 8%. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. I've already addressed some of these in the slide here. The one thing I'll mention is that I've tried to also stay in markets that had similar kind of economic requirements, and that has limited me consciously to Western Europe primarily and Japan, as well as North and South America. You may want to consider who the real end users are. Again, I just caution you on any kind of price-based strategy going overseas. Rarely have I seen that work. I will say I've run into China pretty much everywhere. I don't think it's any news to anybody, and I, in each case, have been able to compete successfully against them, so they're not like invincible or something. I've also used XM for a very long time. Absolutely critical. I will tell you right now that that if you do not have XM as a service, you are taking it really, in my own view, an extreme risk financially. Open account basis is the only way it's going to work in these developed markets. If you don't have XM, you'd be completely foolish to do it. I just can't emphasize that enough. You'll see later how this has saved me many a time. I will say that one thing to keep in mind is that when you're small, let me just state the obvious, each sale is proportionally large. The risk of this is magnified significantly when you're doing it overseas because of all the normal situations you've got in terms of recovering it or resolving a technical issue or whatever it may be. Again, the XM Bank has been really critical in mitigating that kind of expense. Not that it doesn't mean you have to do it. You have to actually get there and sort this stuff out. But you're not betting the farm. I mean, that's a nice way to sleep past 3 in the morning. The exports actually have grown quite a bit for us, and on a percentage basis and on an absolute basis. I mean, really, it's most of our stuff right now. It's taken me a long time to really get the company into a situation where they fully appreciate the specific requirements of that, but we've now passed that successfully. I will say that having organic language skills is pretty critical. If you don't have native speakers for those markets, you're going to have some problems. I've gone out of my way to make sure we have that. My own experience here, almost everybody wants to open an account. I mean, we do a letter of credit for the Middle East because there's no way possibly of getting that sort of stuff. Despite XM, there's just no way it's going to work, so I don't do it. And the legal systems are so dissimilar in certain parts of the world that you just want to avoid it at all costs. But those are things you can think about. It's not that big a deal. People do it all the time. I do it, and I'm not like some big outfit. I'll tell you, XM is really critical. Here's the kind of things I do. I mean, I use this. I mean, payment terms are extended whether you want to call them official or not. I mean, first off, you gotta ship it. All right. Well, that's 6 weeks, maybe 8, depending on what's what. Well, right away, I mean that's payment terms, right? And then they're not going to start their clock until they get it. So you can count a minimum is going to be like 90 days. All right. And then they might want 60. One of the reasons I stay in Western Europe is most of the customers in Germany, for example, are net 30. It's pretty normal. You go to Spain, you're going to add 90 onto your shipping. So you got to look ahead to this sort of thing. If you got to manage your cash on it. XM protects your cash, but you got to manage it. And then I mean, you have no idea what's happening with these companies. I mean, this is not a transparent world. I had one bankruptcy we had to deal with. And I thought, oh my God, it's a big company. And suddenly I've got a non-collectible receivable problem. Okay, but much less of a problem with XM. Slow payment. Sometimes customers are customers. They're big. You're small. Get used to that. But if they try to string you out, at least you got a recourse here, and it's something that actually puts a little bit of fear in them too. I might tell you, they know there's going to be problems going into the U.S. So anyway, this working capital insurance is just something that I'm talking there for a reason. I'm trying to save you guys some grief, really. in fact, as we're looking at this sort of thing, I'll just give you a couple of specifics. I had a very typical deal. It's a European customer, and you can see what I did there. I was able to offer them extended terms, and I knew I'd get paid. Okay, I knew it was going to happen. So when I thought, oh, okay, another 30 days, sure, I don't need the money. I could do it with a lease, knowing I'd get collected. Had a bankruptcy in Canada. That's another country, in case you're forgetting. Okay. I had a very large sale that we made to a German automotive customer, and when you get up there real big like that, you can see you're embedding the farm territory. You can get special credit limits from Ex-Im. Surprise to me, but it was great. I've used my material suppliers for really for working capital in a lot of ways, and I could do it because I had the receivable actually covered. So it's just like a bank, trade credit, no news here. But without Ex-Im, it would have been just a big risk. They would never have taken it. Anyway, there's positive results from all this. I don't put a lot of stock in awards, but it has effects elsewhere. So, I'm very grateful that they thought that our efforts were really worth recognition here. So I'm not complaining, but the real truth of the whole project here is when you actually can make some sales. It's also like looking behind the veil, so to speak. Once you get into this stuff here, the world never looks the same to you. There's always somebody that you know. You can see the similarities. I don't care really which country you're talking about. Even I had a guy from Iran show up once, it's just back at the height of everything, and just sat there and says, I'm just an ordinary guy. It's those kind of things that, in fact, do kind of make this thing worthwhile, apart from the financial side of it. You like to know things like that. It's kind of nice, In any case, that's sort of the story here. I'm sure you got plenty of questions. I want to make sure you got time for that. And I know you need to know more details about Ex-Im, so I'm going to sign off now here and stand by for any questions you might have later.
Thank you very much, Craig. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Sharon.
Thank you, Adrienne. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'd like to thank Industry Week for hosting this, and also thank you to Craig for sharing his valuable insight and experience with us. Very impressive company and export operations. We appreciate that. So for those of you that don't know Ex-Im Bank, and I'm hard-pressed to think that you don't, we are an independent U.S. government agency of the federal government, and Ex-Im Bank was started in 1934. Our mission is to create and sustain U.S. jobs through exports, and we support not only the export of products but of services as well, whether they're freestanding services or services that are performed in conjunction with the sale of a piece of equipment. If you remember nothing about what you hear today from me, I ask that you at least remember this. Small business is our business. In fiscal year 16, we supported over $2.5 billion of exports from small businesses, and that's the SBA definition of small. So no company is too small to work with Ex-Im Bank. We are very proud of our record on small business, and we're here to help all size companies, but in particular emphasis, especially with my teams and the regional office staff, which are near you throughout the country. We are dedicated to working with small businesses. So having said that, the U.S. government does need to support products that are made here in the United States. There has to be a certain U.S. content percentage, when that's going to vary most of the time for us. If it's a short-term sale, it's going to be 50+% U.S. content. So could you please respond to this poll question to see if you've got a U.S.-made product, a non-U.S.-made product, or a combination of both?
The responses are 50% U.S.-made, non-U.S. is 6.1%, and both is 44.9%. Back to you, Sharon.
Right. Thank you, Adrienne. So that's terrific. If a company is a small business, we're able to support some non-U.S. made product, and we would love to be able to have the opportunity to talk with each small business individually about how we can support your non-U.S. product. So that's good information for us to know. Appreciate your responses on that. So on the eligibility criteria for Ex-Im Bank has certain standards that we would like the exporters to, or companies to meet. Companies have to be in business for at least 1 year. They must have a DUNS number. That means you must have a obtainable credit report with Dun & Bradstreet, and financial statements and or tax returns, and as we mentioned before, a product that is at least 50+% U.S. content. Ex-Im Bank offers a couple of different solutions, particularly for smaller and medium-sized companies. The first solution is a working capital loan guarantee. Here's a little hint. Whenever you hear anybody from Ex-Im Bank talking about the word guarantee, you will know that the lender is our customer. We offer other solutions for exporters, which I'll get to in a moment, but this is a guarantee that we will offer to a lender, which makes a loan to you so that you can purchase or produce your product for export. We provide a 90% guarantee to the lender, which includes principal and interest, on loans that they make to you. There are no minimum or maximum amounts. The loan, of course, is going to be dependent on your company's financial statements and the debt that you'll be able to service. The collateral for the loan is the export-related inventory, which includes work in process, which is a very important point because most banks exclude that. When you go to your bank for a loan and you want to pledge your inventory as collateral, they are going to use raw materials and finished goods. The work in process is excluded. But under our program, we will allow the inclusion of all three categories of inventory: raw materials, WIP, and finished goods. In addition to the inventory, the foreign receivables that are generated from that sale will also be pledged as collateral. Usually those receivables are under a letter of credit, but there are exclusions, and we'll talk about that in the next module when we talk about insurance. In addition to using the working capital proceeds to purchase your materials for export, you can also use the funds to collateralize a standby letter of credit, which a buyer may often require as a performance bond. Under this program, you don't have to put down 100%. You'll be required to collateralize the letter of credit at only 25% of the face of the actual invoice, of the letter of credit. So our next item that I wanted to talk about is actually export credit insurance. This is a very simple concept. There's got to be an export. It's made on credit terms, and Ex-Im Bank will insure it. This is a product that Craig is using at Jayco. There's three important benefits to credit insurance. The first one is rather obvious in that it protects you against non-payment by your foreign buyers due to both commercial and political risks. The second benefit is that it can be used as a sales tool. Many companies are finding that their buyers overseas are unable or unwilling to open up letters of credit, and they want open account credit terms from day one. Our insurance policies allow the extension of credit up to 180 days, and some may even qualify for capital, if it's capital equipment, will qualify for 360 days. The third benefit is that the insurance can actually be used as a financing aid. Craig said earlier, and I believe this is a direct quote, you have to manage your cash. And he's absolutely right. And this insurance policy lets you do that. When you make a sale on credit terms of net 90 because your buyer's demanding it, but you have to pay your suppliers at net 30, you've got a cash flow problem. One of the things that this insurance policy will allow you to do is to take those insured receivables to your lender and have them discounted or added right into your borrowing base so that you have immediate access to that cash. So those are three very powerful benefits. The risks that we cover are here for you to see. Commercial risks such as insolvency, bankruptcy, and default. Due date comes, due date goes. No money, that's a default. And political risks such as currency transfer risk, war, revolution, insurrection, and something very interesting, which is the cancellation of an import or of an export license after your goods are placed en route to the buyer. We have several policies that are geared specifically to small business, and the first one is called Express Insurance. This is our newest product, and it is 95% coverage with no deductible. The premiums are paid only on what you ship when you ship, so there's no lost premium dollars. And this policy is really for companies that are just starting to export or that only have a handful of buyers and are looking to grow, and we limit the number of buyers to 20 buyers under this particular product. For a more advanced small business exporter, we have a small business multi-buyer product, which is also 95% cover and no deductible and pay as you go, but we may grant the exporter some discretionary authority to make their own credit decisions based on their prior experience with the buyer or on their ability to obtain and interpret international credit reports on foreign buyers. If you want to insure just single or multiple shipments to just one buyer, we have a policy that will do that. It is 90% coverage, and that also has no deductible. That is a very good product if you're just looking to cover a buyer that is getting a little too rich in their sales and you're getting a little bit nervous about the buyer. I just wanted to throw up here an example of a rate under the Express Insurance policy. Most small businesses sell on credit terms of up to 60 days. So that's why I'm showing you this rate here. The rate is 65 cents per hundred of the gross invoice value, regardless of what country it is. That means on a $25,000 order, the premium is only going to be $162.50, which I think everyone has to agree that that is very reasonably priced. If you use the credit insurance with the working capital guarantee product that we spoke of earlier, you will get a reduction in your premium of 25%. So we're really trying to make it as advantageous as possible for small businesses to get into the export market and do so in a safe manner. There are just a few restrictions that we have to advise you of. Our charter does not allow us to support any military or defense-related products or buyers. There are certain restrictions such as humanitarian products and drug interdiction products. But by and large, if you're talking to us in the regional offices and we think your product may have a military application, we're going to ask you a little bit more about that. Of course, as we talked about earlier, there is a U.S. content requirement. The short-term requirement, meaning your credit terms are no more than 180 days. And if it's a medium-term transaction, which we didn't really get into, but we certainly can answer your individual questions about medium-term buyer financing. For medium-term, which is repayment terms between 1 and 5 years, the U.S. content has to be 85% U.S. for Ex-Im Bank to support the entire transaction. You may want to check out our website after this call or at some point in the near future. We've got something on there called the Country Limitation Schedule, or CLS. It lists every single country in the world, where we provide coverage, where we don't provide coverage, and where we can't provide coverage as dictated to us by Congress. In spite of that, we are open in about 180 countries around the world, and I'll bet we're open in the majority of countries where you're doing business or where you're planning on doing business. Only if you are doing some very large transactions, over 10 million, do we have shipping requirements. I don't know that that would apply to this particular audience, but we're happy to answer any questions that may be submitted in accordance with that. And then we also have something called additionality, which means that we just really need to understand why you're not able to do your business without our help. It's very easy to justify, but it is something that we need to let Congress know relative to the value that we're providing to you, the U.S. taxpayer. So this just is an example of the country limitation schedule and what it might look like when you see it. The most important thing to remember is that X means that support is not available. If you have any questions as you look at the country schedule, just let us know. Speaking of letting us know, I wanted to share with you the locations of where we all are in the country. And we have our regions are broken out into 3 sections. In the East, which I'm the manager of, we've got offices here in Miami, New York, and Atlanta. In the Central region, we have offices in Chicago, Houston, Minneapolis, Detroit, and in the greater Dallas area. And out in the West, we've got offices in Orange County, San Francisco, and Seattle. We've got staff there that are ready to take your calls and listen to your challenges and help you make the most of your export business. With that, I will turn it back to Adrienne to see if you have any questions and how we may be able to really make the most of this webinar for you. Adrienne?
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a number of questions. Let's start this one first for Craig. What has been your experience with XM management on uncollected funds, and what is the smallest of invoice does XM cover?
Smallest invoice? Boy, you got me there. I mean, I'll say that the smallest invoice that we've ever sent, okay, was something like around, I don't know, 10, 15 grand, something like that. The first part, though, I didn't hear. It didn't come in clearly. Could you repeat the first part of the question?
Sure. The first part is, what has been your experience with XM's management on uncollected funds?
Well, it's been great. I mean, I'll tell you, you actually, because there's quite a bit of stability within the XM organization, this is a consequence of the passage of time. You start to know people, among other things. Now, I don't find that very often, not in a government agency and, certainly not in a civilian one. That helps, but they are right on it. It's very promptly resolved on the matter. I've got insurance for other stuff. This is a lot easier than those things.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, the next question.
Can I add something?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. There are no minimum invoice amounts at Ex-Im Bank. So if you want to insure a $100 invoice, you can do so.
Okay, thank you. This question is for you, Sharon. Does Ex-Im have a focus on veteran-owned small businesses?
We do, and I thank you very much for that question, with tomorrow being Veterans Day. We have a group that is focused on special interests, and veterans are certainly one of those. And my colleague Michael Jackson in our Washington office is dedicated to veterans, and we can provide you with his number, his email address, actually, which I know off the top of my head, is michael.jackson@exim.gov.
Okay, before we go on to some more questions, I think there was one more poll question that we wanted to ask. And the question is, would you like a follow-up call to discuss your individual needs? Either yes, or the question is no. So if you go ahead and answer that, we'll collect those results. And now I will go back to the questions. This one is for Craig. What's been better, a distributor or a rep agent?
Well, a lot of that depends on the nature of your product. The buy and resell is a mandatory situation in Japan. So I guess in some ways you could call it, kind of a distribution type organization. That's set by law in Japan. On the other hand, Europe is, and really everywhere else, is handled in a pretty normal fashion. In our case, we use reps, so I want to have a direct contact with the customers. And a lot of the stuff that I sell requires a technical selling approach, so I need to be involved in that, or my engineers do. Something's got to happen like that. I'd say that the U.S. is probably your best guide as to how you actually go to the market overseas. If you use a distributor domestically, chances are that'll also work for you overseas, and vice versa on the rep thing.
Thank you. Sharon, the question's for you. Does insurance cover service-based businesses?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we just have a brand new piece of literature on services. As I said earlier, we provide coverage for services. How we determine the U.S. content on a service is that the service must be performed by U.S.-based personnel, either here or temporarily located in the host country. We have many architects, engineers, freight forwarders that are providing their services stateside and invoicing a foreign buyer directly. So we are able to support those freestanding services.
Thank you. Craig, this question's for you. How did you know there was a market for your product?
That's a good question. Well, I didn't. But I did know one thing. I mean, in my case in printing, I did know that people read books everywhere and newspapers, stuff like that. So I thought it was a pretty good chance that they had the same kind of needs. But the way, just departing from the humor, what I actually did was I went to trade shows to start off. That's a Commerce Department thing. They'll advise you on that. And that gives you a sense of that particular market pretty quickly. And you can see if there's products there that are competitive, if there's similar need, and all that kind of stuff. But I think you'll find that pretty much the developed world, has needs that really are quite similar. One thing that you might want to consider, too, is, because this was a bit of a surprise to me, is that whatever product you've got, if it fits a domestic market here, there's no guarantee that it, in the same shape it would necessarily fit somewhere in, say, Western Europe, number one. Number two, the sort of the market introduction phase or the product development phase here may very well be different around the world, and that can be an advantage. I mean, for example, in my own case, the domestic market was pretty much saturated when I decided to go overseas. I found that in Europe it was rapidly evolving. 20 years later, it's starting to get sort of a midpoint. And now in Japan, where I'm going there now, I'm starting right from the scratch, and there's this series of market introductions that I hope will sustain that product line for some years to come. And that's one of the things that's nice about the export business. As you go around there, you get ideas from other markets, sometimes very good ideas, but you'll often find that your ideas here have not really been fully adapted, or in each case it allows you to prolong the product life that you've got yourself.
Another question for you, Craig. What's the best way to find qualified foreign buyers?
Ooh, okay. Well, I mean, the first step is the Commerce Department. You got local guys there. They know what they're doing. I mean, there's an American overseeing this stuff, but frankly, the people that actually really are digging around, those are local people, and they do know local people. Now, I'd be really surprised, frankly, if when you went there, the first one is the one that you'd end up with 20 years later. That was the case with me. Because there's other sources once you get in the market. You'll make your own contacts. You'll run into people, whether it be at a trade show or through other OEMs or customers or whatever it may be. And then there's some things that just simply happen. Like, for example, I was working with this, we do a lot with a German OEM, and they had a subsidiary in Japan. And those guys called me up because they had 2 employees that were retiring, and they wanted us to hire them as local reps. So you'll see all of the above. All the things I'm describing here, you've probably all seen already in the United States. And that general kind of approach that I'm describing here is something that I think each of you'll find produces the kind of representation you need. They're quite professional, the ones I've got.
Sharon, this question is for you. The question is, can I provide financing to customers in South America through XM? My company is an agent for a major Malaysian manufacturer.
Well, if your products are made in Malaysia, they would not qualify for Ex-Im Bank because we have to support a U.S.-made product. We are open in many, many countries in South America, but again, I think if you've got a foreign product, there's not much we are going to be able to do to assist you, unfortunately.
Another question for you. Does a customer have to meet some sort of financial criteria for us to use credit insurance?
Well, your buyers do need to be creditworthy, just like we need to be creditworthy when we go for a loan or apply for a credit card. So the answer is yes. On some of our products, the ones for small business, such as Express Insurance, we are trying to help as many small companies get involved in exporting as possible, and so we take on the burden of purchasing whatever credit information our underwriters need to assess the buyer's creditworthiness. But of course, that's always something that you as an exporter are going to want to be aware of. And It's always a good idea to ask them if they have a credit report available on themselves that they can provide to you, and also ask for trade references from other companies that have sold to them on credit. But yes, we do take a look at the buyers to make sure that there is, as we say, a reasonable assurance of repayment.
Hey, Craig, this question's for you. Does exporting take away from your domestic sales?
No, actually, it enhances it quite a bit. I'll give you one example. We have in these cases you saw pallets there. It's one of our product lines. The changes that we discovered in Japan, for example, are things that we then adapted for our domestic and Western European products. And as a consequence, both the quality and the uniqueness of our products were enhanced by doing so. So each of those markets, in turn, have shown an increase in sales because of our export experience and our export experiences with customers in a foreign land. So that's been, I'd say, quite the opposite.
Okay, this next question is for Sharon. Do you cover products that are dual commercial and military use? Does it matter what the product is or who the customer is, or both?
The answer is both. So we always take a look at what the product is. If it's a dual-use product, we just want to make sure that it is going to a commercial or civilian application. I'm smiling right now because I'm remembering when I first started in this business many years ago, and I was working with a small uniform company in New Jersey. It was probably one of the first calls I ever made solo. And this was a uniform company, and they were selling buttons. And their buyer was an army of a certain country in the Middle East. And I said, oh, buttons, it's going to be fine. Well, guess what? It wasn't fine. So it was a lesson learned that it's not just the product, it's also who's buying it, who's the obligor. And, of course, if the product is a military product, even if it's going to a private sector distributor, not something we are probably going to be able to support.
Okay, Craig, this question's for you. How much time do you spend overseas with your international customers?
Well, of course, much is necessary. But if you're looking for a benchmark here, I spend probably good 6 weeks in Europe. I mean, mind you, I'm running the company too. I mean, I still have to get over there. They want to see the boss. I mean, you got to just plan on that. You got sales managers, you got reps, but you're gonna have to be there. I mean, kind of a nice year, it'd be 4 weeks over there, but it's a little more than that usually. And then in Japan, I'm there at least 2 weeks. I've got local guys that spend time out in Mexico and in Canada that I don't have to put in, but it's going to be something like that. Plan on a month, 4 trips a year, for sure, minimum. That'll be whatever target market you got.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. How long does it take to receive a quote on an XM policy?
Well, the first step would be to, reach out to your regional office, and they're going to make sure that they understand your business and what your needs are, and they will, in most cases, work directly with the underwriter to try to expedite your application. I'd have to say anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, hopefully on the shorter side of that, depending on the underwriter's workload.
Another question for you. How can I check my foreign buyer's credit?
Well, Ex-Im Bank publishes a list on our website. It is a list of agencies that we know of. It is not an endorsement of same, but it is a list of companies that we know of that provide international credit reports. So you can certainly go on our website and look for that. It's called the list of credit reporting agencies. Or if you reach out to me at some point, I'll be happy to send you a direct link to that. I also want to mention that the U.S. Department of Commerce provides something called an ICP, an International Company Profile, and that is an acceptable credit report to us and one that you may be very well interested in looking at. Just as a sidebar, I want to mention that Ex-Im Bank in most of the major cities are co-located with the U.S. Department of Commerce, so we invite you to come see us at these export assistance centers where Ex-Im Bank sits with the U.S. Department of Commerce and in some cases also the Small Business Administration.
Another question for you, Sharon. What is the XM application process like?
Well, it's quite simple, believe it or not. The Express application is a page and a half, and it is very simple and easy to fill out, and we're here to help you every step of the way. So please don't let what you perceive to be a lot of paperwork stop you from working with us. We in the regions want to help you complete that application. We'll work with you on the phone so that the underwriter has 0 to minimal questions.
Okay, Craig, this question is, what market indicators do you use when wanting to enter a foreign country?
Well, I think it's whatever you do in the States applies anywhere, really. I mean, so like, for example, in my case, I knew that there were, printers using my pallets, right? So I got a general indication here. There were some reports there. Commerce Department helped me out. Some idea about the organizations, trade organizations that were there, the number of customers that were there. Some general idea about the size of those customers and if they had equipment that would use my pallets and so on. All that is sort of publicly available data. It's not that difficult to reach. It's particularly easy to reach if you go to the Commerce Department. But really standard kind of market research techniques prevail, and they'll give you a good indication as to whether it's worth the time, the money, and the risk.
Can I just add something that Commerce has an unbelievable website, and if you haven't visited lately, may I suggest you do? It's export.gov.
Okay, thank you. Craig, this is another market-related question. Have you used marketing and brand awareness to help build your business?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I'll tell you, on that topic, every market, the way you communicate in overseas markets is not necessarily the way you communicate in the United States. And you got to be very observant on that. You have to get local advice on that matter. You have to have absolutely idiomatically perfect native-speaking people that are preparing that information. I don't care how fluent you are in another language. I'm fluent in German, but I'm not that fluent. And you need to have that kind of idiomatic language in all of your communications, electronic or printed. Also, whether it's printed or electronic or in some sort of social media, that varies widely too. You need to find out how people actually really communicate on the business level in each of the markets, and it is all different everywhere you go. You can find it out, I mean, it's there, but it's absolutely critical, more so when you're overseas, because you're not there. You have to communicate that stuff in a very good way so they understand who you are, and in a positive way, not a negative way, like a gem in the middle of Indiana, like me, for example. They can't even, they thought it was India. One guy thought it was India, I mean, you got to be kind of careful. Make sure you watch the spelling, okay? And A, was pretty important for me. Anyway, it's there for you. You can figure it out.
Thank you. Question for Sharon. What if I want to increase the credit limit extended to my buyer?
Well, our underwriters are happy to consider increases. We are going to make sure that it falls within the guidelines. We may ask for your assistance. If the limit is over $300,000, we may ask for your assistance in getting some financial statements on the buyer. That's when I said trade references are always of help, and you can always be your own trade reference. Your own payment experience is going to go a long way in helping the underwriter to approve a higher limit for you. That's the whole goal of the program. We want to increase your buyer limits. That means you're selling more. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what we want to help you do.
Okay, thank you. Craig, the question is, did you add more jobs when you started exporting?
Oh, yeah. I mean, volume is volume. And in my case, I was not only able to get more jobs, they were at a different level. The demands of overseas customers have, I have to tell you, really have increased my perception, changed my perception of quality. They've increased the kind of things that we do. I've had to hire more talented people at a higher salary. I mean, don't panic when I say that. Okay, these people they earn their salary. Okay, that this is recovered with the actual sale. But the consequence of this export business, for me in any case, has been that I've had to upgrade the skill level of the people that I've got, as well as increase the number of them, and also my equipment. I mean, I had to buy better stuff in some cases.
Thank you. Sharon, question for you. My bank is not comfortable with the country risk. How can XM help me?
Well, they can. You can credit insure your foreign receivable with Ex-Im Bank. That will make your receivable not only a domestic receivable, but an Uncle Sam receivable. And so your bank should be much more willing to add those foreign receivables into your borrowing base.
Okay, Craig, question for you. How did you differentiate Jayco from its competitors in order to gain market share?
Well, same way you do domestically. I mean, unfortunately, I have this name that doesn't pronounce very well in my language besides English, but, you know, it's kind of well known. So I had to get around that right away. And what I would do is simply differentiate my products on the things that are important to the customer. You know, people, that resonates with anybody. And I did market research on competition. I mean, obviously, you've got to have benefits and features and benefits that also give you at least an implied comparison here between your competition. But be also, what I'm talking about, it be very aware that there are laws, different laws overseas about your ability to identify competition and be real specific in your features in comparison to it. A lot of this has to be done individually, and you'll need local advice as to how to actually go about it. But in terms of how you compete, same way as everywhere. You know, you got stuff that they don't. You have to explain that clearly to somebody, and they have to have a need for it.
And I think we'll end with this question since it's a good one, and we'll give you some time to explain. The question is, can you tell us about any particular surprises, good or bad, that you've had along the way to exporting?
Oh, wow. That's a long list. You know, I would say that, you know, pretty much everything was to some extent sort of a new experience. I had quite a bit of experience when I worked for large companies, but it's quite different when you're on your own, really. And a lot of these things can be addressed very simply by being observant, seeing what's around you. Take one, for example. I mean, it's a simple one. Body language. You know, Japan. Very critical. How the seating arrangement is. I mean, these all sound like, you know, incidental things, and yet they're not, because they really are how business is defined over there, how they see who is in charge, and so on. They're at all levels, from the product itself to how it's distributed, you know, to the characteristics that are valued in each market, as well as your own personal conduct, both in terms of how you put your organization together overseas and how you conduct your own self in front of people here, are things that will be part of this learning process. Don't worry about it. There's only a few things that really would be catastrophes. I never found one, but I'm still looking for it. But if you're observant and you're just a normal sort of person, you know, and you listen and you're kind of respectful of people in general, you'll do fine. It'll be okay.
Okay, sorry, one last one. Question is, was it worth it, and would you do it again?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, for all kinds of reasons. One, I mean, let's just talk about, you know, sales and, you know, money and all that kind of thing. You know, there's people out there that want to buy your product. Well, go get them. That's number one. Number two, you know, do you really want to have an understanding of the world? What is your view of the world in general? Are you part of that? Are you something separate from that? Do you view it in an adversarial way, or what? You know, as I've gone through this, I've found that my perspectives on these things have changed quite a bit. I mean, I was a soldier for a long time, okay, and in that case, it was clearly an adversarial situation that I was in. You know, well, my views have tempered somewhat as I've gotten closer to the people with whom I've interacted. You know, and it's a different way of doing business. You have to actually accommodate them, do what they want to do as well, too. Different perspective, one that is really, really well worth it. You know, I'd encourage you to do this for all those reasons and perhaps a few that I forgot.
All right, thank you very much. I want to thank Craig and Sharon for an excellent presentation today, and I'd like to thank the Ex-Im Bank for making today's webinar possible. Just as a reminder, if you're registered as a group, please add the names and emails of all attendants on the exit survey that we'd like you to take. And on behalf of Industry Week, have a productive rest of the day. Thank you.